All right, well, everyone, welcome to podcast number 47, the Brooklyn Bomber. No, this is the Daiquiri, and it's episode 3. Daiquiri was created by, not created by a Cuban, it was created by an engineer named Jennings Cox in 1900. Can anybody verify that? No?
Debatable.
Google just as good as the next guy.
It could be true. It might be true.
He made one sometime. Let's go with that.
It was a banana daiquiri was enjoyed by Frito Corleone in The Godfather. I don't know if anybody knows that or not, but now you do. The actual Cuban pronunciation is daiquiri, which sounds interesting. Purists say that granulated sugar should always be used instead of simple syrup. Can anybody agree with that? You like that?
I saw that.
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, right on. You also Googled that.
I also Googled that.
And the Hemingway daiquiri was originally a frozen drink, which I did not know. John F. Kennedy drank them even after the embargo. And National Daiquiri Day is July 19th.
Nice.
So I'm gonna call out the person who. I'm going to call Sam, who I think this was your idea. So
yes.
Let's talk about why you wanted to do this.
The daiquiri is my favorite drink. At wintertime, springtime, snackery, all the time. It's refreshing. It's light. You can drink a million of them. Like it's one of those drinks that's so easy. It's always enjoyable. And depending, there's a million different rums out there. So you can drink 50 different daiquiris and have the same proportions. Still use lime juice and simple syrup or granulated sugar. Did anyone do that, actually?
Granulated sugar? I did not.
No?
I think this is a good time of year for the daiquiri, too, with summer coming up.
Absolutely.
I think that's another reason why we decided.
It's always fun to make a daiquiri that's not frozen, because you hear the word daiquiri and everybody immediately wants something out of those big slushy machines. So.
Which are terribly disgusting.
They're just 80% sugar.
I do wish somebody had brought an Island Oasis machine with them today.
Well, it just so...
I have noticed too. It seems to be a popular choice with bartenders, even like nice craft cocktail bars. And I think maybe it's just one of those things like at the end of the night, after working a busy shift, you want something really simple and refreshing and nothing too complicated. You're spending your whole night making complicated drinks for everybody. You want something just simple and good.
You and I have talked about this a million times. It's really easy to make something taste good adding a bunch of ingredients, but it's really difficult to make something taste good with 3 ingredients. It's got to be perfectly in balance.
That's true.
So
it's kind of food or cocktails.
It's also it's a good tell. Like if you get a bartender who can make a good daiquiri and like just doesn't even bat an eye at it, you're like, okay, this person knows what they're doing. They understand balance. They they get it.
I think we proved that in the martini episode too. I think that's a nice 2 or 3 ingredient thing.
Yeah.
Maybe 4, but I think this one could be a little bit more complicated. So.
For sure.
Yeah. So one of the key ingredients obviously is the juice, and one thing we want to talk about with the daiquiri is why fresh juice is so important. What are the best kind of juices to use?
We touched on it a little bit on the Manhattan, and this is obviously the correct time to bring it up. But it's just one of those things that so many people, like we've mentioned before with home cooking and all that kind of stuff that they just don't do anymore. So they always buy stuff out of a bottle or the little tiny green things and stuff like that, or sour mix and stuff like that, and it changes the entire drink just simply by cutting a lime in half and squeezing it in your drink.
And you can also, that way too, Eli and I make a daiquiri very similarly, but we use different amounts of lime juice and simple syrup, and that makes, they're, again, you can use the same rum, the same ingredients, and you can have 2 different cocktails. And it's easy to adjust to whatever you like. It's, easy to change it. Yeah.
I feel like if you actually go to an island too, like they're just pulling the fruit off of the tree, and of course that's what they use is fresh juice.
And that one's gonna be good.
Yeah, they don't need simple syrup because there's this tree right next to them, and they can just use fresh lime.
To digress real quick, just from the daiquiri, looking back to the late 1700s. Grog, which everyone's heard of, was essentially a daiquiri. These sailors were drinking lime juice with rum and sugar and water at that point because ice was not available. So grog may have been a precursor to the daiquiri, but it's been around a long time. This concept of And hey, let's all not get scurvy and drink a bunch of daiquiris tonight.
Daily dose of vitamin C and your daily dose of alcohol.
Exactly.
I read a pretty funny thing actually when I was trying to look in, like we were the history of the daiquiri, and David Wondrich, he kind of touched on a lot of different, these are all the possibilities, but he goes, to be honest, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said like, any idiot can come up with rum, lime, and sugar. It's pretty like if somebody, to try to come up with an exact origin of that is pretty, difficult.
Yeah,
So.
And to go off what Amy was saying too, where rum kind of originated and where the daiquiri probably came from, there were fresh limes everywhere, so that's what they used. So that's what a daiquiri is.
Sure.
It's not a bunch of preservatives in a bottle.
Or the banana. It's like,
Yeah.
of course, a banana daiquiri because there were banana trees.
Talking about fresh juices, this is a conversation Sam and I had probably over a year ago. I was reading an article today, doing my last minute research. Very prepared. In 2010, Dave Arnold did an article in the Atlantic where he compared juices by several different methods. Lime juice. So he did the spinning style juicer and also hand pressed juicer. At the time, what he did was he juiced two different styles and then 4 hours later did the same thing, and they taste tested with like industry elites, Dale DeGroff, all the people we've been talking about, and of the panel of tasters, everyone agreed that the 4 hour old lime juice from the hand press juicer was the best. The second one they picked was the 4 hour old other juice.
The Reamer.
So everyone agreed that across the board the 4 hour aged juice was actually better than the fresh. And I know you've done more reading into that than I have. But.
And so Brooke and I were talking too maybe about that, and so they also did maybe like a day old lime juice.
They did one that was a few days old, yeah.
And so, but what was interesting is, so here in the States, most of the juice that you get when you go to a cocktail bar that uses fresh juice is going to be a few hours old because you're juicing it before service. So when you go in at 8 o'clock, at the height of business, the juice that's in your cocktail is probably about 4 hours old. Whereas in other places, they preferred the older lime juice, but that's the juice that they normally get whenever they would order a drink. So it's kind of too like, this is what I've grown up with. This is what I've always drank. I like it better because it's what I'm used to.
Sure.
Which is another interesting.
And I should point out that in this tasting, they made limeade with exact proportions of water, simple syrup and juice. It wasn't just like tasting straight lime juice. So.
Well, going back to
no one wants that.
Between squeezing it and reaming it, I had someone ask me about that a while ago, and I think squeezing it is generally better because you get the oil out of the fruit instead of where when you grind it down with a reamer, you get a lot of the pith, so that it instantly is going to make it bitter to start with.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to sit there, it's going to get more bitter. And so the oil, just the same way as when you express one over your drink, you get that kind of velvety, more rounded flavor out of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And it includes the rind, which has so much flavor.
I would say the bottom line though is, Eli can attest to this at the restaurant when they make juice in bulk, and we're always trying to keep up on dates and everything else. But just taste it, taste the product. It goes for food, goes for cocktails, goes for anything. That's going to tell you a lot more than a date will or anything else. Acidity is the first thing that's going to go. So. Taste it. If it tastes nice and bright like it should, tastes like a lime, then great. It doesn't really matter how old it is at that point, but if it's starting to go,
proper storage and refrigeration can obviously keep the shelf life of your juice going for a lot longer, but a lot of people don't take into consideration that it's more in like the first hour after you juice it where your juice is changing, because immediately your pH starts to change. That's a really good article that's pretty easy to find too, because that was really the only in-depth study I think anyone ever did on that, but they go a lot into the pH balances. And I mean, I know I was a lot more conscious of it after I read that on batching juices. We generally have to keep about 1.5 gallons of lime or lemon, or well, both around on the bar at all times, because you can just run through that like drop of a hat. So it's not ideal, but like Rick said, you just taste through it and make sure it's still good product. But it's super key to get that stuff in refrigeration immediately, not leave it out while you finish the rest of your juices or anything like that, because who knows how it's changing. And I think they toyed with it a little bit more in the experiment too with the aging, and they did run it through like several days to see where it really dropped off its peak at 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just little things you don't really think about. I mean, these limes weren't refrigerated earlier and they're fine, but you know, once it's out of its protective shell, so to speak, it's vulnerable to oxygen and all those chemical factors.
I think it's also important to talk about too after you juice it, and it needs to be strained to get all of like the pulp out of it, because that also will affect the flavor a lot.
And especially for cocktail recipes too. I mean, if you're asking for an ounce of lime juice and there's a bunch of pulp in it, you're not getting an ounce of lime juice in your measurement. Like,
yeah, especially if you're gonna like again use the reamer, you need to really filter that before you pour it in a drink. Or yeah, it's 80% pulp around the edge of your drink.
yeah.
You know what I love about this conversation is how much people who make drinks care about how good they are. Seriously, you know, it's like, where would we be without that?
Well, we just talk about this.
You'd be back in the
We
80s.
secretly drink Stag and whiskey.
It's not really a secret.
So, what's the best daiquiri anyone ever had? What's the daiquiri that changed your perception of daiquiri?
I feel like when I really fell in love with the daiquiri was when I was working at Taste in St. Louis. And one of my friends that worked there, his name is Joel Burton, and he's the one that introduced me to the snackery, which is kind of like, oh hey, like shitty service, great service, whatever. I'm gonna make a couple of daiquiris and I'm gonna make little shots for everyone and drink them. But it was just like, I love tart probably more than most people, and for me it was just like really great rum, you know, good juice, enough sweetness, and like you didn't want to stop. You wanted a buffet and not a snack.
Anybody else?
I think the first time you just try a classic daiquiri in general.
Yeah.
Because inevitably
First
we've
time
all
is
had frozen concoctions
Frozen,
before we had the fresh version.
out of the bottle from
You're
the
right,
end of the
just-
aisle.
And I think people get confused a lot too about what a daiquiri is because they've only had the, you know, Island Oasis or Strawberry Daiquiri. I don't know how many times I'll go to a bar that has like a decent bar program and I'll ask for a daiquiri and they're like, I'm so sorry, we don't have that available. I'm like, do you have some rum? Do you have some lime juice? We're set. Let's go.
Because I think you gotta bring it to blender.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the problems for people who don't like to drink rum. I never thought of myself as a rum drinker. It was rum and Coke or, you know, rum in a mixer or whatever, and that's all I ever knew. And, you know, little did I know that this like very simple daiquiri was you know, simple
It's
and
so
elegant,
good.
and you can drink 20 of them.
We
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the rum companies at Work Bar, like El Dorado, did a little bit for them, and the Gardy family and stuff. They realize that they're mostly an ingredient, not a, you know, people don't just sip rum a lot. El Dorado, like 12 years of age, you know,
Sure.
is definitely sippable, but so they put so much into the cocktail thing, and they actually have a gentleman. He's one of their ambassadors, and then all he does is go bar to bar teaching them how to make mojitos and other rum drinks, and that's all he does. Because that you have to do that to sell rum. You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Dream job.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other good ones you've tried that you from a certain
you know,
place?
I love that I can go into any bar, any like corporate structured bar, and I know that all of their drinks are going to suck, but I can get like a straw banana shitty daiquiri. It's going to be delicious.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
Like,
It's true.
let's not lie to ourselves.
Right.
It's good.
They are good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Float a little Myers on top of that thing. Oh, hell yeah.
I didn't drink a daiquiri for years, and I sound like a name dropper. I was in New York City when I was at a bar called Seamstress, and Seamstress actually absolutely gives their bartenders a little spot. They have their own space there, and you're not allowed to go in. So like you can hang out with them at the edge, but they have this room where they are allowed to go over and pull stuff off the walls and make stuff. And the guy was like, one of the signature cocktails we're making tonight's a daiquiri. And of course, me being the moron I am, I'm like, hey, daiquiri. So I tried it, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever tasted. So, you know, it was a real, like the thing we're talking about. It was a really perfect daiquiri. So that's my big name drop. I'm done.
I think it's generally not the first like rum style drink that people have. It's once you've kind of been introduced into this side of the industry a little bit more. When like it's so weird to think of a 3 ingredient simplistic drink as like, oh, it's a, you know, deep in the craft cocktail world is where you'll experience it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of true. I mean, it's probably not the first rum cocktail you're going to try, but it does open the door for like this whole tiki phenomenon that I'm super obsessed with, admittedly. But it's just there's so many variations.
Are any of you guys old enough to remember Tangerine downtown St. Louis?
On Washington?
Yeah. So Tangerine, they really, it was the bar that brought back a lot of craft stuff to St. Louis because we didn't have one. It was all, liquor and wine bars and whatever. And Tangerine opened up on Washington, and they did zombies and Mai Tais and all that stuff in awesome glassware. And it was a vegetarian place. It was also one of the first vegetarian places when Washington was kind of making its resurgence. But there were nights where I had enough, zombies and stuff like those type of drinks to go blind, and that's
you only need one.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's the sad part. Is that I didn't have just one. But it was a really cool shotgun bar, really good glassware. They had go-go dancers half the time. It was just really fun.
You could go next door to the Galaxy to see Suicidal Tendencies.
Absolutely. Yeah. I saw Stereo Lab there one night, and then ended up at Tangerine, and I don't remember how I got home, but it was great. So.